And we're live. Welcome to NFL, where the NFL starts and ends. A very somber Wednesday afternoon, or even if you're watching this in late evening, very somber Wednesday. As Steelers legend Franco Harris has passed away at the age of 72. And this was a big thing because Franco Harris was a key contributor to this Steelers winning 4 Super Bowls in the 70s. Everyone will say the Steelers defense, this the Steelers cut in. Franco Harris was a key contributor in that. And 50 years later, those same Steelers are facing the Las Vegas Raiders, formerly known at that time as the Oakland Raiders. The Raiders, it that was always Franco Harris's favorite matchup. He always said that his favorite matchup was to face the Raiders. Harris was known for the Immaculate Reception that happened in 1972. 50 years after the fact, they were going to do another Raiders Steelers game on the anniversary of it. It just saddens me that Franco Harris won't be around to see it. Harris, during this game, his number would have been retired. His number 32 would have been retired, as well as I would assume he would have been a captain of the Steelers on that very day. That won't happen, obviously. But Harris was also a key contributor in the Steelers going back-to-back twice, which only the 49ers are the only other team to ever do that, to go back-to-back in terms of winning a Super Bowl, the next year win a Super Bowl, and then a couple years later do it again. That's really difficult to do. It's difficult to win back-to-back Super Bowls or just a Super Bowl. Never mind back-to-back. Never mind that the Steelers that did it twice and the 49ers that did it twice. The thing that saddens me the most was if you were an NFL fan beyond the gridiron, you would have known that on NFL Network on Friday around 9 o'clock, they would have aired A Football Life, which is a series of players, mostly all of them are retired, if not very close to retirement. And Franco Harris would have been up. On Friday, his Football Life would have been aired. It's still going to be aired. It's just going to be sad to see he's not around to see that either. Franco Harris's son announced on Wednesday morning that his dad had passed away in his sleep. No conclusions otherwise. But what else would happen to Franco Harris? I won't doubt will be on Sunday, including on Saturday, will be talked about on every network, CBS, Fox, NBC, NFL Network, about it, about Franco, about the kind of person he was, a great ambassador of the game, a great ambassador of the Steelers, and he surely will be missed. Now, if I can try to get through the best of the show, but before I do, if you remember about 12 years ago or so, when Dandy Don Meredith passed away, Terry Bradshaw on Fox went and announced that to the world about the importance of Don Meredith and the importance of all these people. And he announced that, and he and Don were very close. In fact, Bradshaw brought up a point of his first interview was held that he did was with Danny Don Meredith and Howard Cosell and Frank Gifford. And he said, I remember Cosell saying, and here's the worst interviewer, Terry Bradshaw. Boom. And that was just the way it was in those days. That Howard Cosell had a very much that kind of a demeanor, and Danny Don Meredith was always trying to have a good time with everybody. I wouldn't be surprised come Christmas Eve or even Sunday that Terry Bradshaw either won't show up, not because he doesn't want to, because that is a very difficult thing to deal with, or even if he is, he probably won't be able to get through it because it would just be too emotional for him. I encourage you that you watch a Football Life by Franco Harris. I will do the same, and Franco Harris will be missed. As we try and move on this, Arizona Cardinals general manager Steve Kine has announced that he will take an indefinite leave of absence due to health concerns. I would assume that this was ongoing prior to the season, thought he could deal with it. Come the end of December, they realized he couldn't deal with it. This was announced on Sunday afternoon that Steve Kine was no longer going to be the general manager, at least for right now. And shortly thereafter, there was a report that came out that he may not be the general manager after the season, that they may go in a different direction. Kime, Kingsbury were given multi-year contracts, extensions, with a lot of money. If both Kime and Kingsbury are not back next year, that's an interesting decision made. And where does this organization go? As the NFL last week told the owners in the owners meeting, over the last 5-10 years, all the owners have spent north of $800 million on coaches that are not coaching for their team anymore. And that just trying to say, hey, guys, either don't give these people big contracts or keep them around. We'll see. That's hard to believe that the owners will just listen to that because they want to win now. That's what everyone wants to do. I've said this in every sport. If you don't want to win now, you're never going to. You have to be in that mindset. A lot of coaches are. And that's what makes this world, or that's what makes this game one of the best, is because you want to win now. The New York Jets are one of those teams that wants to win now, as Mike White, I will say this before I get into Zach Wilson. Mike White was going to try and play on Sunday. In fact, he went to 10 different doctors and couldn't get cleared because he got sawed in half by Matt Milano and Gregory Russo a couple times, and this guy kept coming back in the game. At the end of the game, they brought him to the hospital. He had fractured ribs. He had broken a couple others, and he still tried to play. And there was 10 doctors that said no, We're not allowing you to play. And I was surprised that he didn't get up, that he was getting up, I mean. I was surprised he was getting up with how he was dealing with it. It was shocking to me. Now, that obviously opened the door for Zach Wilson, who was bumped up to the backup last week. Didn't know, in fact, that he was going to have to start the season or start the game against Detroit. A narrow loss. And that fact, Zach did fairly well. Numbers were pretty good. But he's still he's got to figure this out if he's him. If I'm Zach Wilson, I can't compare myself to Russell Wilson, where Russell Wilson in Denver, the only excuse I can have that there's two excuses, but I'm going to use this one. The two excuses are that Russ is old, or the second excuse is he's running an offense he's not really comfortable in running. It's a precision offense. It's something he doesn't do. He's not a timing quarterback. He wants to run around a little bit, extend plays, then throw the ball. He doesn't want to just go and be like, I'm going to throw the ball immediately because that's what my coach tells me to do. That's not him whatsoever. Zach Wilson is also expected to start and tab the starter against the Jacksonville Jaguars, who did, in fact, play the Cowboys and played them very well. If I'm Zach Wilson, this is your chance. You got 2 weeks. You showed you could do some things in against Detroit. Some really good, some really bad. Because he's a gunslinger. And what does that mean? That means he's going to throw the ball over the yard and hope that if he throws the ball in the small window, it doesn't get intercepted. Well, the chances are it gets intercepted. For an example, Elway, for the longest time, would just throw it in, try and get it in there. Didn't understand you get picked off that way. Once you figure that out, he was all right. He became more precision based, and he worked through that, and he was fine. Zach Wilson's got to do the same. The Colts also named a new starter as Nick Foles is going to start. Nick Foles, I don't know how good he's going to do. The one concern I always had with Nick Foles was this. If he doesn't run the Andy Reid, Doug Peterson offense, he's never been a good quarterback at that point. When he doesn't get to do that, when he went to the Rams and had to play with Jeff Fisher, wasn't very good at it. When he had to go and do all these things, he wasn't very good at it. Jeff Fisher, and the only real success that Nick Foles has had was with Andy Reid, was with Doug Peterson. And so when he said he was going to go to the Colts, hey, you got Frank Reich, you got another guy who was under Andy Reid, another guy who was under Doug Peterson. This could work. Frank Reich ain't there anymore. It's Jeff Saturday. It's Parks Frazier's show. That's what they're gonna do. It's gonna be Foles' responsibility to prove at this stage of his career that doesn't matter. I could win with coaches. Jeff Fisher was just a bad coach, but I can win with coaches. Although, and not the Andy Reid and his tree. The Colts have also placed Jonathan Taylor on season-ending IR. Taylor had re-aggravated his ankle and was going to miss time anyway, and the season was going to be over. So there was no reason to even try and play him. Taylor, for the first time this year, missed a practice. He hasn't missed a practice his whole career, and all of a sudden he misses a practice. and he misses a week. Like, Taylor has not been the same guy that he was a year ago, and that whole Colts team hasn't been the same. Their defense is very good. Their offense is the highest paid offensive line in football. But why are they so bad? It's the mystery of the NFL season. Why are the Colts so bad? Suggesting their defense is really good with a great mixture of youngsters and veterans. Their offensive line is the best in football and it was paid like it. They got young, talented, tall wide receivers that can go up and get it. You have the best running back in football according to last year. And then you bring in an improvement over Carson Wentz and Matt Ryan. There should be no struggles on this team. Why is this team struggling? It doesn't make sense. This is very similar to the, if you remember last year, the Raiders were very good and they were winning these overtime games. But they were winning games that were one score or less. I believe they had won 7. They led the league with 7 of those one-score games that they won, and 4 of them went to overtime, and they won all 4. But they would win these one-score games more than anybody, and they always seemed like they fought to the end. This year, that's not the case. They're losing a lot of those games. Not games necessarily in overtime, they've won those, but they've lost games in the regular during regulation. They can't seem to stop anybody. Like, it's just shocking to me. We saw the same thing with Denver. Denver has a really good team. They're really young on offense, but they're going to be really good. They bring in Russell Wilson. They bring in an offensive coach. This can work. And no, just doesn't. Raiders same way. Raiders went to the playoffs. Now they're not. They're fighting, but then it's unlikely. The same goes for the Colts, a team that should have made a playoff run this year because they look like they got better. They got a better quarterback. They got a better offensive line than anybody else. Their running back's better than everyone else. Their defense is massively improved, and yet it's not happening. The NFL season is unpredictable, to say the least. Matthew Stafford, on his wife's podcast, announced he is not retiring after the 2022 season. And a lot of people said, well, that's the reason why Baker Mayfield went there. I disagree with that. I think Baker Mayfield went there because that was the one team he thought gave him the best chance. You get put with an offensive mastermind in Sean McVay, and you get put with a very good defense. The problem is Aaron Donald hasn't played the last couple of weeks. Your offensive line is injured everywhere. You got third offensive lineman in there. They got guys that aren't even the backups that have to play. Backups are hurt. That's how bad they've been. And they can't run the ball a lick. So when you are pass happy, that's what's happened. And Matt Stafford had suffered 2 concussions very dangerously close to each other, as he had suffered a concussion, took a week off, came back the following week, suffered another concussion. Very dangerous. They said, nope, putting him on injured reserve, and we're calling it. Because we're not going anywhere anyway. The Rams were eliminated this past Monday against the Packers in the NFL playoffs. So they're not going to get to the playoffs anyway. I guess you can say, well, we'll try and salvage and get a couple wins. Yeah, no, that's not going to happen. You're going to try and get maybe a win but keep as much of your best team healthy as possible. And maybe when you do have Cooper Cup back, which I doubt will be this year, something happens. Who knows? I really think the reason the Rams are in this situation has been the whole thing of, I'm gonna censor myself, but F them picks. That's what they've always said. F them picks. We don't need him. We'll get the best players. Jalen Ramsey, Matthew Stafford. Um, and then we'll do the Bill Belichick way of thinking, which is get player, a really talented player in the third, fourth rounds and work it through that way. And the Patriots have been very good at that. But the problem with the Rams is when you do that, you don't have a first round pick that you can just go and say, he's our best player. I'll give you a great example of teams that do this, that have used their first round picks and they've been very successful at it. Let's first start with the defensive line, which would be Washington. Washington has the most, I think they, and first, Washington has the most first round defensive linemen in terms of first round picks that became defensive linemen. They have the most. Now, sure, they got to pay some of these guys, but they did that in order to have one of the best young offensive lines. The same goes for a lot of other teams that do that. I'll give you another team that does it on the offense. The Cowboys do it. A lot of the Cowboys offensive linemen are first round picks. The only two on this team that were the starters that aren't, I guess, well, there is three because Terrence Steele was not a draft pick. He was an undrafted player. But were Tyler Biadasz, the center, and Connor McGovern, the left guard. They're not first round picks. Tyron Smith was a first round pick. Zach Martin was a first round pick. When they had Lyle Collins, he was an undrafted player. But a lot of these guys are first round picks. And you do that in order to get a stalwart for many years. And that's what a lot of these teams do. And then then you can be a little more sporadic. You can go and get these players, wide receivers, corners, safeties, whatever. But when you're the Rams who are trading away your first round picks, your second round picks, your third round picks, your day 3 picks, it gets really difficult because you may have 2, 3 draft picks that year. And now we're looking at this board that has been all the players that we thought we could get are gone because we didn't have a day 2 pick, we didn't have a day 1 pick. That's a problem. I believe the thing is the Rams don't have a first round pick since to 2027, I believe. That's essentially a waste of your team for the next 6 years. That's a lot of time for no first rounders. And it will probably and that's Les Snead's way of thinking. Not a terrible way of thinking, but it won you a Super Bowl, but not necessarily the best way of thinking. And finally, Jalen Hurts and Michael Parsons out? Not exactly. Let's first start with Jalen Hurts. Jalen Hurts, in the game against the Bears, injured his shoulder. He has a sprained throwing shoulder. His throwing shoulder is sprained. Now, Coach Sirianni, Coach, and all of the trainers and Hurts have said that there's a chance he plays, or we're not ruling him out. We're not doing this. We're not doing that. But and Hurts said there's a definite chance I play. Yesterday on Tuesday, he did not participate in practice, similar to Michael Parsons, who we'll get to in a few minutes from now, or a few seconds from now. Now, I won't say Hurts is out. I won't say that probably until Saturday morning because I know this because there's still a chance because the Cowboys did a very similar thing in Week 6 when they said Dak Prescott could play. Dak Prescott could play, and he didn't play. He didn't, but they kept saying that he would enough, and about when they did that day, they said no, he's not gonna. But that's what they did. Wouldn't be a surprise if the Eagles do a very similar thing. It wouldn't surprise me a bit. Next up is Micah Parsons. Now, Micah announced on the Voncast, if you saw this, that he's more beaten up at the defensive end position and at linebacker, off-ball linebacker, because he always felt like he was never getting hit when he would blitz as an off-ball linebacker. Never. Now he's constantly getting hit, which is the case. Micah Parsons has had an ankle issue, a hip issue, a back issue, uh, yeah, an ankle issue, a back issue, a hip issue, a shoulder issue, and I believe also a knee issue during the season. So he's not 100%. And they also said, well, he did not participate either. Yes. Or limited as well. A lot of people did. If you look at the Cowboys believe in veteran. I don't even know how you would describe it. Veteran, I guess you can call them veteran days off. That's what we'll call them. But there's very few players who can go and roll out of bed, and the Cowboys will say, yeah, he can go. Tyron Smith's one of those guys. Zach Martin's another. Zeke Elliott is another. Dak Prescott isn't because they know the injury that Dak has had, and they won't do that to him. They know as a quarterback, it's rhythm based. It's all about getting comfortable. But one of those players that can get out of bed and just roll out of bed and say, I'm going to play is Michael Parsons. They know the value he brings. If somehow Michael Parsons plays, which he will, but if somehow the Cowboys win on Christmas Eve, don't be surprised if Micah doesn't play the next 2 weeks. For the Thursday night game, because it's a short turnaround, on the last game of the year against Washington. Not because he wouldn't be able to, not because he wouldn't want to, but because the coach is gonna be like, you know, you're fine. We're okay. We have 10 wins. The likelihood of anyone catching us is not there. Okay? We got 10 wins. If we can get one more, and it would be against the Eagles, we'd be okay. We'd be great. Because then no one's going to catch us at 5, at a 5th seed. No one is. So we'll be okay. But you don't need to be so hurt that if we can get to the playoffs and you're healthy enough to go and we don't let you go 2 weeks, we may be okay with that. But I wouldn't be surprised. And I wouldn't be surprised if Hurts gets the same treatment. If after this week they realize it's worse than what we thought, we tried to have him play and he got hurt or got a little more dinged up, they don't play the remainder and they say, "We'll wait till the playoffs. Let's give him 2 or 3 weeks and see what happens." Don't be surprised if that happens. But above all that, Parsons will play. Hurts, we don't know as of yet. But that Christmas Eve game between the Cowboys and Eagles is going to be a feisty one.